All right, guys. Great being here in Lithuania. Thanks, Login, for inviting and hosting me. My name is Viktoras Jucikas. I'm a founder of YPlan, and today I would like to talk about marketplace businesses and growing marketplace businesses. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the most interesting talk in the past 4 days, in the past 2 days. A brief few words about myself. I'm coming from Lithuania. I'm Lithuanian myself. I started working on computer graphics, and that's how I got interested in computer science back at a young age. Then I studied AI, machine learning, and computational sciences at International University Bremen in Germany. Then spent 6 years as a strategist in a big international investment bank called Goldman Sachs. And right now, I'm a co-founder at YPlan. I wanted to tell you a little bit about marketplaces and growing marketplace businesses. It's very important to understand what a marketplace is. It is a very confusing term, I think. A marketplace is essentially a business or a platform which connects two sides, supply side and the demand side. So it's connecting sellers and buyers. So buyers buy, sellers sell. It is very, very attractive business model to build and to organize, because essentially you're owning zero inventory, and you're just taking a small percentage on all the transactions that buyers and sellers do. There is a whole spectrum of marketplace businesses, from being a pure reseller like Maxima, which is basically stocking products and selling them on their shelves, to something like eBay, which is stocking zero products, but instead connect buyer and a seller. In the past 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of kind of business model changes, and companies going from pure marketplaces to pure reseller. Good examples could be Zappos, the shoe store. It started as a marketplace, but then very quickly they migrated into a reseller model. So essentially, they would be stocking the shoes and selling them to the customers. It is also very important to understand what type of the business model you want to build, what type of business you want to build, who you want to be. Building a marketplace is different from building a reseller, and it requires very different approach. Another good example to understand the differences better between a reseller and a marketplace could, for example, be rental car markets. So Avis, Zipcar, they are much more a reseller, while Uber or Relay Rides are a marketplace. The most important thing in building a marketplace business is understanding your supply and demand dynamics. So if there are no buyers, no single seller is going to sell anything. If, on the other hand, there are no sellers, well, the buyers cannot really, buy anything. So as an example, if I go to, Garūnai market and I want to buy a beautiful leather jacket, and there's no one selling the leather jackets, or the selection is very, very small, I'm just not going to go there anymore to find any, leather jackets. On the contrary, if someone is, selling some amazing striped track suits, and there's no one coming to buy them, then they may as well go and find some other place to sell them, and maybe go to Kaunas Urmo Bazė or something like that. I have a couple of examples here I want to talk about, and which help to understand how figuring out supply and demand and why it is important. Usually, narrower verticals perform much better than very, very wide verticals. As an example, Amazon didn't start by selling everything and anything. They started on a very, very narrow vertical. They started by doing books, and only then expanded into CDs, into whatever else they sell right now. It's also important, if possible, to try to hack one or both sides of the business. The best example here is Airbnb, which could not have built supply side themselves. So they just went to Craigslist, scraped all the room offerings, and presented it on their website. Another example, kind of very Lithuanian, halfly Lithuanian example, which I like to tell about, is Vahanda. So instead of building a marketplace, they actually decided that they need to build a supply side first. So what they did, they acquired a Lithuanian company called Salonium, and that company was building a tool which helped spas take appointments. So they were replacing pencil and paper in spas with a software which allows to enter what kind of service and when someone actually booked. By doing that, they locked in large and large amounts of suppliers, and then they actually knew at what times what is available at a given supplier. So afterwards, they went to all those suppliers and said, hey, dear suppliers, dear spas, now we are going to also help you and bring you an extra customers, extra clients. They were able to do that purely because they knew what is happening at every single spa, and they also could offer a very, very wide selection of spas to all the customers. If, on the other hand, they were to build the whole thing at the same time, so both supply side and both demand side, they may have well struggled, just because the supply side would have been very, very limited. On the other hand, on a demand side, we have services like Songkick, who are selling tickets to people willing to listen to their favorite band or favorite artist. Again, they didn't start by selling tickets straight away. They started by providing a service which allows you to track a favorite band or a favorite artist and tell you or notify you whenever that artist is in town performing. So it didn't take them too long to have a lot of customers entering their preferences, entering where they live, what artists they favor, and then they were able to offer those customers tickets to the artists, to the shows. On the other side, they had this huge demand base, and therefore the ticketers or the promoters were willing to partner and sell them those tickets. Usually marketplaces develop in 3 steps. It all starts with like novelty of proposition, and Hotel Tonight is the best example there. Hotel Tonight is essentially a service which allows you to book a hotel room in a couple of taps on your smartphone. So it is enabled by technology. Before smartphones existed, Hotel Tonight could not exist. And it's an amazing and sexy proposition. I land in a new town, I open up my app, couple of clicks, and I have a hotel room there. So it's new, it's innovative, it's amazing. However, as a next step, they have to go and build all the supply. Because if I go to a certain city and there are no hotels in the Hotel Tonight, I'm just not going to use it anymore. So there has to be a certain depth of supply for the marketplace to then grow. And a third step, when you have all the supply, is running recommendations, personalization, or curation on all the content the platform has. So Spotify is a good example there. Now that they have pretty much every single song, they can help you, and they can do a great job at understanding what kind of music you like and suggesting you the best kind of songs to play next. Marketplaces also have, like all other businesses, have this bell-shaped curve adoption rate. Usually marketplaces start with innovators, then some early adopters start using it, but it takes a little while and it takes a large quantity and quality of supply to get to a early kind of majority, late majority users. Mobile-only marketplaces are obviously very, very cool, and YPlan is first and foremost example of this. We started doing a mobile-only marketplace, but before long we learned that it's actually very, very difficult. It's not easy to do mobile-only marketplace. Mainly the reasons being that acquiring a customer is very, very expensive, and then retaining that customer is very, very difficult. And for a good marketplace model, you would want to get your customer's lifetime value, which is called LTV there, to be greater than CPA, which is customer acquisition cost, in less than 6 or 9 months. So to do that, you either have to sell something which is very, very expensive, or you have to take very, very high margin, or you have to have very, very high frequency of usage, or maybe a combination of those. So the only purely mobile marketplace which I know is successful is probably Uber, just because the margins are high and the frequency of use is very, very, very high. Otherwise, it's important to consider and evaluate using other platforms like web, for example, just because people engage much better on a variety of platforms. Customer acquisition is easier. Building partnerships with other brands is also much, much easier. Geographical expansion of marketplaces is also something which is pretty difficult, especially if you're doing something which is geographic, location specific. So for example, scaling businesses like YPlan, scaling businesses like Uber, scaling businesses like Hotel Tonight is very difficult because you essentially have to have a team in every single geography or every single place where you're running the business. And they have to build a supply in that area. They have to help the customers. They have to help the suppliers there. Also, building that supply base, it becomes difficult and slow. On the flip side, it becomes a very, very good competitive advantage because your competitors, if you're moving fast, just cannot build it at the same scale and the same speed. So it's very important to have a decent expansion blueprint. How you're going to do it, because if you're going to go to 20 cities, you better figure out something which is the same for every of those 20 cities and execute it very well. At the same time, you have to be ready and prepared to actually toss that blueprint out of the window, because every single city, every single country is actually different, and the same recipe just doesn't work all the time. You also have to be ready to leverage technology as much as you can, and if need be, use APIs, scraping, whatever it takes to acquire as much supply as possible. And last but not least, it is also good and important if you find what is called kind of a magic number and try to execute against it. So the magic number is a good concept I learned from looking at Lyft. You may have seen they recently leaked some numbers about their expansion and about their business, and it was mentioned there that if you call a cab, so Lyft is a very similar service to Uber. It's essentially a taxi kind of hailing service. If you call a cab and the cab does not arrive in less than 6 minutes, customers basically stop using the service. If, however, the cab arrives in less than 3 minutes, then business is flying, it's all amazing. So for Lyft, the magic number was what is the arrival time of the cab to the customer. Once they figured it out, that whatever it takes, they have to make that magic number a reality in whichever city they are in, otherwise the business just doesn't work. The other interesting part about geographical expansion is that you start having multiple offices in multiple time zones, and it becomes a very good fun and exercise. We used to make jokes of guys in San Francisco who come to work at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., it's maybe 6 p.m. in London, and everyone is already cracking beers, and they just start their day. It's very important to not underestimate the impact scaling and having multiple offices has on your company's culture. You stop having all those water cooler conversations. You cannot just walk over to your colleague and tell him something or ask him something. Everything has to start happening over email, over Skype. You have time differences. Responses are not instantaneous anymore. You also have to realize that your managers have to work much, much harder to manage all those different offices. So the advice there is to have a very strong culture and build a very strong culture, because the culture is going to be the thing which is going to bind your team together while you're out, while you're in another city, and also get your people to bond outside work, inside work, as much as you can. Just make them understand that their colleagues are not an email address, but they are actual humans sitting, somewhere else in another office. Another interesting thing about marketplaces is that they can become so large and so big that they can actually change the laws of physics a little bit. So Uber is the best example here. They essentially are positioning themselves as this challenger brand, as this brand which is nonconformist, that they are challenging the status quo. And by doing that and having amazing, large war chest, loads of funding, they can actually go do some lobbying, change some laws and legal system to actually make themselves a new establishment, which would be then difficult to replace later on. Last but not least, having an amazing team is, I would say, the most important thing, hands down, in any single business. Is it a marketplace? Is it a SaaS business? Is it whatever, any other kind of business? So keep your best people as close to you as you can. Make sure that if people are not that good, you let them go as quickly as you can. And the saying which I've heard from Moo.com CEO a while ago, which I repeat here verbatim, is that a hole is better than an asshole in the team. And every single time, I remember this advice, and every single time it basically holds true. So it's a very, very, very good one to remember. And very last slide is this kind of story about this very famous Lithuanian tennis player. I will read it down. It's basically a tennis player, Vitas Gerulaitis, who actually lost 16 times in a row to another tennis player, and then he managed to win one game, and he said, let that be a lesson to you all that no one can win against Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row. So I would say you have to be very, very tenacious. You have to be relentless. Building marketplace businesses is very difficult, but again, rewards are very, very large and great. And that is it. I wanted to say thank you to Startup.lt for bringing and having me here. They are great guys helping to build the ecosystem in Lithuania. And I would want to finish it up and continue with any questions anyone may have. Right, questions, anyone? Can someone bring the mic to the gentleman there?
Thank you. When will YPlan come to Lithuania?
Very good question. So a lot of people ask me, what does success mean for you guys? Like, what is a success? And my answer to that question is always, I'm coming from a small town called Birštonas in the middle of nowhere, which is somewhere in Lithuania. And I will consider YPlan a success when we have YPlan running in Birštonas. Any more questions? All right, thanks everyone. It was a pleasure seeing you. Have a great day.